Welcome to Heartline Stories. Today's story follows Charlotte, a brave young woman facing betrayal and heartbreak. Pregnant and alone, she takes a job caring for a millionaire's son, only to uncover whispers of secrets and lies lurking in the shadows of a grand mansion. What is Project Lucas? Who can she trust in a house filled with locked doors and suspicious glances? As the mystery unfolds, danger creeps closer, and Charlotte realizes the stakes are higher than she ever imagined. Stay tuned to witness her courage in the face of chilling truths, and let us know where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Once upon a time in a small, quiet town, there lived a young woman named Charlotte. She was kind, with a heart full of love, but her life had taken a difficult turn. Charlotte was expecting a baby, but her boyfriend Benjamin had left her. He said he wasn't ready to be a father and disappeared without a trace. Charlotte was hurt and felt all alone, but she was brave and decided she would face the challenge for her baby. One day, Charlotte saw an ad in the local paper. A wealthy man named Mr. Harrison needed someone to take care of his young son, Lucas. Lucas's mother had passed away, and Mr. Harrison was often busy managing his big company. Charlotte thought, maybe this is my chance to earn some money and provide for my baby. She went to the large mansion where Mr. Harrison lived. It was the biggest house Charlotte had ever seen, with shiny windows and a garden filled with colorful flowers. She felt nervous as she knocked on the door, but when Mr. Harrison opened it, he smiled kindly. "You must be Charlotte," he said. "Welcome." Lucas, the little boy, peeked out from behind his father. He had curly blonde hair and wide, curious eyes. Charlotte smiled at him, and he shyly smiled back. She knew she could help care for him. Weeks passed, and Charlotte became close to Lucas. They played games, read stories, and laughed together every day. She also got to know Mr. Harrison, who seemed kind but very tired from all his work. Still, something about the house felt strange. There were locked rooms she wasn't allowed to enter, and the butler, Mr. Graves, always seemed to be watching her. One rainy evening, Charlotte heard whispers coming from the hallway. She peeked outside her room and saw Mr. Graves talking to a man she recognized, Benjamin. Her heart raced. What was her ex-boyfriend doing here? She pressed her ear to the door and heard Mr. Graves say, "We can't let her find out. If she does, everything will fall apart." Charlotte gasped. What could they be hiding? Why is Benjamin involved? She decided to stay quiet and gather more clues. The next day, while taking care of Lucas, she noticed he was holding a small key. "Where did you find this, Lucas?" she asked gently. "It was in the garden," Lucas said. "It's shiny. Do you like it?" Charlotte took the key, her heart pounding. Could this be for one of the locked rooms? When everyone was asleep, she planned to find out. That night, with the key in her trembling hand, Charlotte crept down the dimly lit hallway. She reached a door that had always been locked. Slowly, she turned the key in the lock, and the door creaked open. Charlotte pushed the door open and stepped into the room. Her hand trembled as she held a small flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness. The room smelled old, like books that had been left unread for many years. She saw shelves lined with dusty files and a large wooden desk in the center. There were papers scattered across it, along with a photograph that caught Charlotte's eye. She stepped closer and held the flashlight over the photo. Her heart skipped a beat. The picture showed Mr. Harrison and Benjamin, smiling together as if they were old friends. But why? Benjamin had never mentioned knowing Mr. Harrison. What is going on here, she thought. Her attention was drawn to a locked drawer in the desk. The key Lucas had found didn't fit, so she looked around for something to open it. She found a hairpin in her pocket and tried to pick the lock. After several tries, the drawer clicked open. Inside was a stack of letters, tied together with a red ribbon. On top of the pile was a letter addressed to her, Charlotte Adams. She sat down on the desk chair, her hands shaking as she opened the envelope. The letter read, "Dear Charlotte, if you are reading this, it means the truth cannot stay hidden any longer. There is more to your story than you know, and Benjamin's disappearance was not an accident. He and we made a deal long before you ever entered the picture. But I did not expect things to take this turn. You must protect Lucas, no matter what. His safety depends on it." Sure, Charlotte's mind raced with questions. What deal had Benjamin and Mr. Harrison made? Why was Lucas in danger? And what role did she play in all of this? She tucked the letters back into the drawer and locked it. I have to keep this secret for now, she thought, until I can figure out what's really happening. The next morning, Charlotte acted as if everything was normal. She played with Lucas, served his breakfast, and even chatted politely with Mr. Harrison. But deep inside, her thoughts swirled with confusion and fear. She decided to keep a close eye on Benjamin and Mr. Graves. Later that day, she overheard Mr. Harrison on the phone in his study. She couldn't make out everything, but she heard him say, "We can't delay this any longer. She's getting too close to the truth." Charlotte's stomach sank. Was he talking about her, or was this about something even bigger? That evening, when Lucas was asleep, she crept back into the mysterious room. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. Charlotte stepped carefully into the mysterious room once more, flashlight in hand. Her heart pounded as she scanned the shelves and desk for more clues. This time she noticed a small safe hidden behind an old curtain. The safe was dusty, but its lock looked brand new. What could be so important that it had to be hidden like this? She wondered. She tried the key Lucas had found, but it didn't fit. Frustrated but determined, Charlotte remembered the letters she had seen the night before. Returning to the drawer, she retrieved them, hoping they might hold a clue to the safe's combination. As she untied the red ribbon, she noticed faint numbers written on the inside of one of the envelopes. 123456. Her fingers trembled as she turned the safe's dial, carefully aligning the numbers. When she heard a faint click, she took a deep breath and opened the door. Inside was a small black notebook. She flipped through its pages and found handwritten entries detailing money transfers, secret meetings, and strange codes. One name kept appearing over and over. Benjamin. "What are you up to?" she whispered to herself, flipping to the final entry. Her heart froze as she read the words. Project Lucas must be completed. No one can know the truth, not even Charlotte. Her knees felt weak as she leaned against the desk. What was Project Lucas? Why was she part of this strange plan? And most importantly, was Lucas in danger? Charlotte didn't have time to process everything. She heard footsteps coming down the hallway. She quickly put the notebook back into the safe, spun the dial to lock it, and slipped out of the room just in time. Pressing her back against the wall, she saw Mr. Graves enter the room. He seemed angry, muttering to himself as he looked around. Charlotte hurried back to her room, her mind swirling with fear and confusion. She knew she couldn't confront anyone yet. She needed a plan, and fast. For now, her priority was to protect Lucas, even if she didn't fully understand what was going on. The next morning, Charlotte decided to act normal once again. but she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her closely. While playing with Lucas in the garden, she noticed a piece of paper sticking out from under one of the flower pots. It looked like someone had left it there for her to find. When Lucas ran off to chase a butterfly, Charlotte quickly grabbed the paper. It was a note, and it read, "Meet me in the shed tonight. Come alone. I have answers." That evening, Charlotte waited anxiously until the mansion was quiet. The air outside was cool and heavy with the scent of flowers from the garden. With the mysterious note clutched in her hand, she slipped out of her room and made her way to the shed. Her heart raced as she approached the small wooden structure at the far end of the property. The shed's door creaked as she pushed it open. Inside, the moonlight streamed through cracks in the walls, casting eerie patterns on the floor. Charlotte scanned the room, but it appeared empty. She was about to turn back when she heard a voice whisper, "Over here." Out of the shadows stepped a woman Charlotte didn't recognize. She was dressed in dark clothes, her face partially obscured by a hood. "Who are you?" Charlotte asked, her voice shaky. The woman pulled back her hood, revealing sharp features and piercing green eyes. "My name is Evelyn," she said. "I used to work for Mr. Harrison." "What do you want from me?" Charlotte asked, clutching her flashlight tightly. Evelyn stepped closer, her voice low. "I've been watching you. I know you care about Lucas, and I believe you're the only one who can protect him. But there are things you need to know. Things Mr. Harrison hasn't told you." Charlotte's breath caught. "Like what?" Evelyn reached into her coat and pulled out a small envelope, handing it to Charlotte. "Inside this is evidence, proof of what's really going on. Project Lucas isn't just about the boy. It's about his inheritance. Mr. Harrison's company is worth millions, and certain people are willing to do anything to control it." Charlotte's eyes widened. "What does that have to do with me?" "You've been dragged into this mess because you're close to Lucas," Evelyn said. "Benjamin, Mr. Graves, they're all involved. You're in danger just by being here." Before Charlotte could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed outside. Evelyn's expression turned panicked. "Someone's coming! Hide this!" She pushed the envelope into Charlotte's hand and hurried toward the back door of the shed. "Wait!" Charlotte called after her, but Evelyn was already gone. The footsteps grew louder, and Charlotte quickly tucked the envelope into her jacket pocket. She pressed herself against the wall, her heart pounding as the shed door opened. Standing in the doorway was Mr. Graves. His cold eyes scanned the room, landing on Charlotte. "What are you doing out here?" he asked, his tone sharp. I I couldn't sleep," Charlotte stammered. "I wanted some fresh air and saw the shed." Mr. Graves narrowed his eyes. "You should go back to the house. It's not safe to wander around at night." Charlotte nodded quickly and slipped past him, her mind racing. As she walked back to the mansion, she clutched the envelope tightly, knowing it could hold the key to all the secrets surrounding Lucas and herself. Charlotte hurried back to her room, her heart thundering in her chest. She could feel the envelope tucked securely in her jacket pocket, its presence like a heavy weight. Once inside, she locked the door, pulled the curtains shut, and sat down on the edge of her bed. Her hands trembled as she carefully opened the envelope Evelyn had given her. Inside were several documents, each one more shocking than the last. There were legal papers showing that Lucas wasn't just Mr. Harrison's son. He was the sole heir to an international company worth billions. Another paper details something called a guardianship plan, which gave Mr. Harrison full control of Lucas's inheritance until Lucas turned 18. There were signatures on the documents, but one name stood out: Benjamin's. Charlotte stared at the papers, her mind racing. Benjamin, he's been involved in this from the start. Did he leave me because of this? At the bottom of the stack was a small handwritten note. It read, Lucas must remain with Mr. Harrison at all costs. No outside influence allowed. Project Lucas is bigger than just one boy. Charlotte felt a shiver run down her spine. What did that even mean? Was Lucas in more danger than she'd realized? And why had Evelyn, a former employee, risked everything to give her these documents? None of it made sense yet, but one thing was clear. She couldn't trust anyone in the mansion, not even Mr. Harrison. The next morning, Charlotte tried to act normal as she played with Lucas in the garden, but her mind was elsewhere, replaying Evelyn's words and the new revelations. Lucas, on the other hand, was his usual cheerful self, chasing butterflies and laughing under the bright sun. Charlotte, Mr. Harrison's voice suddenly called from behind, startling her. She turned to see him standing by the garden gate. He had a warm smile on his face, but Charlotte could feel the tension beneath it. Can we have a quick word inside? He asked. Charlotte nodded, her heart pounding. She followed him to his study, where he gestured for her to sit. You've been doing a wonderful job with Lucas, he began, his tone kind but serious. He's grown so fond of you. Thank you, Charlotte replied softly, trying to keep her voice steady. Mr. Harrison leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. I want to make sure you're comfortable here. If there's ever anything you need, or if there's anything you're curious about, you can always come to me. Charlotte felt the weight of his words. Did he suspect she knew something? Or was this just another layer of the carefully crafted facade he presented to the world? She smiled politely. I appreciate that, she said, though her mind screamed at her to keep quiet about what she had found. As she left the study, she couldn't shake the feeling that Mr. Harrison was watching her more closely now. Back in her room, she locked the door and began to devise a plan. Evelyn had given her the first piece of the puzzle, but there was still so much she didn't understand. She needed more answers, and she was determined to find them. Late that night, Charlotte slipped out of her room again, determined to uncover more of the truth. This time she headed to the library, a grand room she hadn't fully explored. If there was one place where secrets might be hidden, it was here. She began scanning the shelves, pulling out books and flipping through them for hidden notes or clues. As she reached the far corner of the library, she noticed a section of the wall that didn't quite match the rest. The wood paneling was slightly off, as if it had been recently replaced. She ran her fingers along the edge and felt a small latch. With a quick pull, the panel swung open, revealing a hidden staircase leading down into the darkness. Charlotte hesitated, her breath catching in her throat. She didn't know what lay below, but she had come too far to stop now. Steeling her nerves, she stepped onto the first stair, clutching her flashlight tightly. The air grew colder as she descended, and the faint sound of dripping water echoed through the passage. At the bottom of the stairs, she found herself in an underground chamber lined with stone walls. In the center of the room was a table covered in maps, blueprints, and more of those mysterious documents labeled Project Lucas. But before she could examine them, a voice behind her broke the silence. You shouldn't be here, Charlotte, it said, cold and sharp. She spun around, her flashlight beam landing on the last person she expected to see. Charlotte's flashlight trembled in her hand as its beam landed on the figure standing behind her. It was Benjamin. His face was a mix of anger and guilt, his usual confident demeanor replaced by unease. What are you doing here? Charlotte demanded, her voice shaky but firm. She took a step back, clutching the flashlight like a shield. Benjamin sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair. You don't understand, Charlotte. I didn't want you to find out this way. Find out what? She snapped. That you've been lying to me? That you're part of this whole twisted Project Lucas plan? Do you have any idea what you've done to me? To Lucas? Benjamin's shoulders sagged, and for a moment she thought she saw regret in his eyes. It wasn't supposed to be like this, he said. I didn't have a choice. Mr. Harrison, he promised me things. A future, money, power. But I never thought you'd get caught up in all of this. Charlotte shook her head, her anger bubbling to the surface. That's not good enough, Benjamin. Lucas is just a little boy. He doesn't deserve this, and neither do I. Benjamin hesitated, then stepped closer, lowering his voice. Listen to me. Mr. Harrison isn't who you think he is. He's dangerous, Charlotte. If you keep digging into this, you're putting yourself and the baby at risk. Charlotte froze. The baby? For a moment she felt a pang of fear, but it was quickly replaced by resolve. If he's dangerous, then I need to stop him, she said, her voice steady. Lucas doesn't deserve to grow up surrounded by lies and danger. Benjamin looked at her, a mix of frustration and admiration in his eyes. You're braver than I thought, he admitted, but you can't do this alone. Before Charlotte could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed down the staircase. Benjamin's eyes widened in alarm. It's Mr. Graves, he whispered. You need to hide, now. Charlotte hesitated for a split second before slipping behind a large stack of boxes in the corner of the chamber. From her hiding spot, she watched as Mr. Graves entered the room, his sharp gaze sweeping across the space. Benjamin, Mr. Graves said, his voice cold and suspicious. What are you doing down here? I thought I heard something, Benjamin replied smoothly. I wanted to check it out. Mr. Graves didn't look convinced, but he nodded slowly. Be careful. You know how important this project is. As the two men left the chamber, Charlotte let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her heart raced as she stepped out of her hiding spot. She knew now that she couldn't trust Benjamin completely, but he was right about one thing. She couldn't do this alone. With renewed determination, Charlotte picked up one of the documents labeled Project Lucas from the table and tucked it into her jacket. She didn't know where this path would lead her, but she vowed to protect Lucas at all costs, even if it meant facing the shadows of the past and the dangers of the present. And so as she climbed back up the hidden staircase, Charlotte knew her fight was far from over.